Hello, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
No, of course. For those of you watching, Rachel and I connected over Instagram, and I had to reach out and ask her to be a part of the show because we just clicked. We had a quick one-to-one, and we were like, "Oh my God, we have to do something together." Our stance is very similar. So Rachel is a business and marketing coach. She comes from this luxury marketing background. She's had an agency herself, and these days she's a business coach who helps coaches, consultants, and service providers to elevate their positioning and messaging and sales. So you watching who know me can see how Rachel and I would get on.
Yeah, very similar background, lots in common, and similar way of understanding how to build business as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I want to dive in and use this as a bit of an opportunity, I guess, to be able to talk about some of this stuff that maybe with other guests, we're focusing on their zone of genius and we're focusing on what they do. Whereas you and I are in similar spaces. Why not jump in on this kind
Yeah,
of
why
business
not?
and marketing space?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Two brains.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's fun for people to get to see us nerd out a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, I don't often get the opportunity, so let's go for it.
Right. Let's do it. Okay. So let's kick off then. What are some of the kind of trends and the strategies that you see in today's landscape that you think online business owners watching this kind of need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question because I always feel like trends makes people think about things that they can, like ways of being on social media or like a
Hmm.
new platform to try or
Yeah.
like things to do. Whereas my take on it is always like trends come from the way that people are changing their behavior. And like that's often when you think about like how social media came about, that's often how
Yeah.
things like that started. So I always start to think about, well, how has people's like behavior changed and how are they buying differently? And I think, a lot of that we've seen shift since the pandemic, but certainly what I'm seeing is that people are so much more like aware and discerning of how they're buying. So,
Yeah.
for example, people don't really want to be sold to so much at the moment. And I know that's probably always felt like the case, but it was certainly like 3 or 4 years ago, you could just put something out there and
Yeah.
like be really open about selling it and people would like buy. Whereas now it's much more about like people want more transparency and they want to see how you work and what's going on behind the scenes and who you are. And
Yeah.
so I think some of the trends are like actually more how we use like new platforms or social media to like have that approach and share more about us and how can you be a bit more like use them collaboratively, use them to connect rather than seeing them as like a two-way, I put something
Yeah.
out, somebody buys from me. So that's the way that I always like I see trends are shifting at the moment. How do you see that?
Agreed. Agreed. I think I see an awful lot of this leaning into that value-led buying approach.
Yeah.
I will say, though, one thing that I'm really noticing when we're talking trends is I'm seeing a big move away from value-led, meaning educational. And
Yeah.
I'm advising my clients now. If you scroll back on my feed, like I used to talk about Instagram story highlights and give little tips and tricks to just set people on the right path of the very first step you can start to take when you're talking about marketing, your social media, whatever it may be. I think these days people get almost bored or maybe a little frustrated with that tips and tricks content because it's like I can find this on Google. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily need you to give it to me. So as much as I think this value-led approach is very much in the forefront of people's brains these days, I think people are sometimes executing it in an
Yeah.
older approach. They're not embracing what value-led means.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's about being able to share it with your unique take. Like you said,
Yeah.
somebody not wanting to get from you what they could easily, you're not a shortcut to Google. Like nobody wants to just go to you instead of a search engine. So it's sharing something that can help somebody, but with your unique take, with how you experience it, with how you see it, which is
Yeah.
also how you're going to be able to differentiate and stand out more as well. Because, like you said, if you're just sharing how-tos, like somebody else can do it. I was, what's ownable for
Yeah.
you in the case, and what's ownable is how you think and how you approach things.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think it almost makes it easier in a good way for our business, because you can just spill from the heart. Like, is this topic that you want to talk about winding you up the wrong way in your industry? And you can really dive in on that and share how you feel. And it also in the same breath, it can be what sets you apart from some of your competitors.
Yeah. Like you can find inspiration. I posted the other day on LinkedIn with a picture of the Beyonce concert that I went. Like, I am sure that you can find inspiration in so many things. And I was talking about how to bring your message, but you might find this as well. But so many people come to me and they're like, I just feel really heavy about how to go out there and share what I'm doing and talk about my business. And it's because it's kind of like trying to fit into this how to. And like you said, it just opens up to be able to express like what's coming from you, and take inspiration from different places as well.
I love that. And it's going to be easier long term to keep that up as well. I think a lot of people get disillusioned with it, especially the space of coaches and that sort of thing, because they've seen coaches that they followed completely change stance or portray a certain persona, and now it's like, oh, surprise, like I was actually in a really bad place in my business when I was telling you all that it was great. By being able to be that upfront and raw about your opinions and your thoughts and give those truly to your audience, that authenticity starts to ring true for years to come. You don't have to keep yourself in check to portray this online persona.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we talked about trends, like one of the trends which I see is coming through is that thing of authenticity, like where you're at. So, because sometimes I think what holds people back is feeling like they can't talk about something in their business, particularly when you're in the earlier stages of your business and you don't feel like you've got the results or the perfect, whatever perfect is. But like you said, if you're able to share a learning that's happened that you've just been through and that you've processed, that is like enabling to help somebody else just from sharing that. You don't have to be the finished article to be able to share from that place.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess it comes from the concept of people trying to position themselves as the expert or the thought leader in their approach in the past, and now that's kind of moved. The needle of where we're trying to present ourselves is becoming background to being ourselves instead of being the expert or something along those lines.
Yeah, which really opens it up, I think, is at any point of business. Like there's a lot of talk about authority, particularly in the online space, if you're a service-based business. And authority used to be a lot about what you've done and what your expertise is and what you can do. And now I really see that shifting to like what your experience is and how people experience you and what like opinions you own, and that really opens up things, because it's not about being at a level in business. It's about you just being really clear and like being passionate about what you're here to do and like what your kind of mission is behind your business.
I think people are afraid of that though, because I think, well, I know personally from working with people and having this conversation and them saying like, oh God, no, I can't say that, people are going to be upset. And it's something that I do see struggles with. Now, I have my thoughts on this, but I want to ask you before I dive into it. Where do you think that fear is founded, or do you think people need to kind of be able to push past and show up as they truly think and feel?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. So I think, so I come from the place of if you've got some kind of fear about it or there's something which is blocking, I don't think it's about ignoring it or just being like, oh, that's just something that you need to go through.
Yeah.
Because it's like acknowledging it. But equally, I think it is about, like, I talk a lot about the longer term view of your business and like taking that step back and really thinking, well, is it more important that I go out and talk about this message and it could help one person because that's my overall business? Or is it that I'm more concerned about like the reaction that like one comment might get on this post. And I think when you take yourself sort of out of the short term, which social media often puts us in because it's like a short term platform or way of marketing, then you start to really realize that you've actually got more power, like more control over this than you're letting yourself, like, then you're letting go, because it's not about the kind of comments you're going to get back. It's about the bigger reason why you're here to share it.
Love that. I see that it ties in a lot to the same reason why people are worried about kind of leaning in on their ideal customer as well. I think it's that kind of worry that if I either choose a niche that's too small, or that I say something that may offend people, they're not going to want to work with me if they don't agree with me. And I don't know that that's firstly necessarily true. I think people can disagree with you and still see that you offer value to them as a service provider. But it's almost, I try to help my clients get to a point where it's like, well, can we focus on the people who do relate? So almost like you said, that does this message help anyone? The people who it clicks for them and it actually will make them buy from you, instead of the negative of it might make some people not want to work with you.
Yeah. And I really love that you said about just because somebody doesn't agree with you doesn't mean they won't work with you, because I think the thing to remember is that if somebody's going to invest in you or want to work with you in some way, it's because they want to learn or take something from you. You're not here to be everybody's friend, and that doesn't mean that you, like, neither you or I are here to like be horrible in business. And not be, you know, being liked and connecting with people is really important, but also they want somebody that can lead them in some way. It really comes through when you start to share your opinions more. And so I think that's the other thing to remember, is actually by sharing those opinions, you are showing somebody how you can help them. Like, and that person that needs that help will hear that message. They will connect with that message.
Yeah. I love this, but we have to move on to the next topic because I could keep it on this for the entire time.
What happens when you get people together?
I know, we're nerding out already. We're only a couple of minutes in. I wanted to ask about strategy as well, because I think that's something that can be really overwhelming as an early stage business owner who maybe has worked in a corporate environment in sales and marketing, but now you're trying to consider a completely different approach and working as a solo or very small entrepreneur. Strategy can be something that is somewhat of a loaded word. And what does it mean, and what do I have to do, and what goes into this? What are some key factors to consider if somebody watching is in that process of developing their digital marketing strategy and wondering what's the right thing and the right steps to make?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is really focusing on what is the strategy for what you want to do in your business. It can get very easy to look at what's working for somebody else and think, well, if I just replicate that, then that's going to work for me. And that won't necessarily work, but also it will feel really hard to do because it's not maybe like the sort of strategy that you want to be putting in your business. So I think firstly, really looking at what is your end point, like what is your goal with what you want to be doing, for example, in the next 3 months, and then working back the steps from that. And then, so the way I work with my clients is looking at what they want to be doing in the next, however time frame, 3 months, working back the key steps that we need to put in place, and then what actions do they want to be taking or need to be taking on a weekly basis that are going to enable them to be hitting that point. So I think it's about, it can feel really overwhelming when you're focusing so much on the end point without really looking at the process of how you get there. So really being able to create that in bite-sized formats so that you have a plan that you're able to stick to really helps.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think reverse engineering, and I think this applies to other strategies that you're putting in place in your business as well, whether that's a marketing strategy or a growth strategy or a sales strategy, like whichever thing you're thinking about, reverse engineering it usually will make all of a sudden the clouds will divide and the sun is clear and you can see it right in front of you. Exactly.
Being really clear as well on how you're going to measure the success of this, which is not only money. Like I know we'll have people watching who don't just always have a business that is, you know, obviously you're in business for money, but I hear a lot from people saying, oh, I don't have like my results aren't tangible because they're thinking about tangible equals money.
Yeah.
And I always get my clients to look at, how are we going to measure the success? Yes, based on the sales you make, but also about how does your business look, or how does also how business, like how are you feeling in your business? Because yes, strategy is very much about the actions that help you achieve a goal and the way that you do that. But in order for it to feel like, in order for you to be able to do consistently, you need to be able to do it in a way that's also going to feel good for you as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's missing a lot. I think a lot of people are using like cookie cutter strategies, that they're either finding templates online, or their favorite coach sells like a no ticket offer that's for their marketing strategy done with a bow on it. And I'm personally, I don't like and don't agree with approaching your strategy in that way. I think it's really important to come at it almost from both ends of reverse engineering where you want to be, and also looking at the kind of who you want to talk to, what you want from them, and really jigsawing all those puzzle pieces together.
Yeah, I agree. There's 1,000 different ways that you can build your business. There really is. And I think often we hear a lot online about, let's create a business that is right for you or U-shaped. And there's a lot of talk about it, but like you said, I think a lot of people are really doing it. And so I totally agree. It's about looking at the goal and then reverse engineering, but also like, what do you want your weeks to look like? What do you want your days to look like? What kind of business are you building? Like, for you, like freedom of travel and being able to travel
exactly
is really important. For me, that's important too, but also like I have 2 young children. So it's like creating the business that you want, not just the goal, hitting the goals. That's not going to
I completely agree. Like, I'm so with you. I'm there. And I push that with a lot of my clients as well, not doing stuff for the sake of it, not kind of getting swept up in someone asked you to do something that maybe feels misaligned, but it's got a nice price tag on it. So you step off of that path that you're on and go and do this additional thing that doesn't really make much sense to do. I think it's really important we put borders on ourselves to make sure we don't just keep spreading our business like wider and wider.
Yeah, agree. And that's like, we talked about like how to create a successful strategy, is like being really clear on how you're going to measure what's working, so that you don't keep going with something that isn't working just because you've invested time into it and because you feel like you should, but equally you're not just like dropping back from it because you don't see it working, when it's just you haven't given enough time.
On the flip side of that, if somebody is trying to develop a successful digital marketing strategy, we have to kind of address some of the common mistakes that people can make in the space, and maybe where they might be going wrong. How can somebody watching avoid making some of the big mistakes that you see, or what are the big mistakes that you see?
And I think we've touched on a couple already in terms of not doing everything for your business. So really getting clear on who do you want to talk to, who is your client, where are they, so that you're not just on every platform because you feel like that's what it should be. Like, my view is that it's like, it could be better to master one aspect of your marketing than, for example, going on TikTok because you see that that's fast growing. Like, actually mastering your email marketing is it's particularly in early stages of business, well, any stage to be honest, but is a much better investment of your time to be able to build like a loyal, engaged community than just going out and trying to build a really wide community who don't really know what you do and what you offer and stand for. It really comes back to those foundations of who are you trying to attract and to get to buy, to convert, where are they, and what sort of like messaging is really going to be able to connect with them. And I often see, and I think it's because the online space is so fast, that those foundations are skipped because it is so easy to test and learn. But it is so much easier to test and learn when you can always come back to your foundations of, okay, is this attracting the clients that I want to be attracting in? Otherwise, you're just testing and not really knowing what's working.
Love that. And I think that there are changes in trends as we go. So if you're just testing without that foundation to come back to, and all of a sudden the trend in the space changes, or God forbid a social network that you lean on gets closed down, or your profile gets deleted. If you don't have that base to come back to, I think it can quite often leave people really panicked of they don't know what the next step is if what they've done up until now isn't working anymore. It's not clear how you can pivot and make that work moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really comes down to as well of understanding like your client journey. And one of the things I was going to say about the mistakes I see is people having lots of different platforms or using their marketing, lots of different channels, but not really understanding how they work together or not thinking about how they work together. But if you start from the point of understanding who your client is and how are they going to come from knowing about you through to buying from you, like what are the steps that they go through, then you start to think about, okay, well, how are my different platforms working together, and how can I make it easy for them? Because there is absolutely no point of being, as you know, of being on all the social media channels everywhere if then somebody has to go through 5 links to be able to right?
Yeah, people won't click on 5 links. Sorry, guys, it won't happen.
It's not. People do not have the time or patience.
And I think one mistake that I see that's more kind of end level rather than a strategic one is that implementation of things like ChatGPT, leaning on tech tools to speed things up, to make it quote unquote easy. And I can spot it a mile off. We're not in a point yet where we may not be in a point ever where these platforms are going to be able to consider your strategic focus and your messaging and positioning in the content that they're writing. So for anyone listening who writes all your content on ChatGPT, please at least edit it from there if you insist on using it.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that as well, like kind of jumping into things and not really kind of thinking how they like integrate into everything you're doing. And I think it also comes back to this short-term, long-term view of things.
Exactly.
You know, I think with a lot of my clients, it's focusing on how in the online space as well, are you creating like legacy content? So content that's going to be around so that people can access it and learn about you without you having to create new content all the time. Like this is a perfect example of what we're doing now. And I think a lot of the focus at the moment is on, right, I'll get my Instagram post out, or I'll get my, I'll be consistent and show up every day and use the ChatGPT. But it's like, actually, would that time be better spent creating a blog that somebody is going to be able to access in the future?
Yeah, really good point. I love that idea of the short term versus long term. I think that gives a lot of perspective to people that may very well be causing damage for their business completely unknowingly, because they're just focusing in on today, tomorrow, next week, and not looking that far ahead to 3 months, 3 years time.
And I get, like, I'm not glossing over the fact that it can feel uncomfortable when you're looking to build your business and get a new client and you just want to get those inquiries in. But the more you can focus on, like, even a 3-month period, like you said, the more you'll be able to build repeatable strategies rather than getting one client in and then the next month thinking, okay, I don't know how I did that. I'm going to do that again.
That was good luck. How am I going to do that again?
Which is never obviously what you want. It's not going to be good for your mindset or your business. So
no, I think that's really reasonable. Is like, even if it feels hard, remember where you're going to be at then as well. Okay, I'd love to share a little bit more about you actually, and how you got into this position, because I know, being from a background of working in a more corporate marketing environment to coming to this online coaching space are worlds apart. So what kind of motivated you to start a career in this world?
Well, if I'm really honest, with the marketing background, it's because I thought you got free stuff, which never works out. So like you said, my background is in corporate marketing. So I spent over 10 years in agencies, so working with lots of different brands, like from household brands to luxury brands. And so I got a lot of experience, particularly in like launching new brands or developing different business models. And I always had a bit of an entrepreneurial side to me. My dad's an entrepreneur, so I grew up a lot around that.
Right.
And when I came out of university, had sort of dabbled in having my own consultancy. So it was kind of always there. And I was always trying to look for it in my corporate role, which just meant that I moved roles, like always with the intention. I just moved around a lot. So I was always like, oh, like what can I do next? And then I had my first son in 2018. And that was just a big, I think for a lot of parents, like shifted perspective. And I thought like, this is the time for me to do it. And while most people spend maternity leave, I did look after my child, just to be clear. I also use nap time to write business plans and okay, there's something here I need to follow. And so I launched my own marketing agency in, I think, a really similar time to you, like February 2020, when everything was rosy and then the world went crazy. But it was really good. I was working with lots of different, mainly lifestyle brands and businesses at that time, a lot of female founders. So I was doing that work. And then at the same time, I was asked to be head of marketing for a startup airline, which gave me like really like high level exposure to fundraising, like based in Silicon Valley. So we were, you know, fundraising hundreds of millions of dollars, like really, really interesting discussions. And I kind of came out of that experience having seen amazing female founders that I was working with, just not being able to move their businesses as they wanted to, due to either usually both like strategy, but also self-belief. And then I also had this experience of just growing and scaling a really like fast growing startup. And I kind of came out of that year thinking, I really want to bring these two together. I want to be able to take this knowledge I've got and the marketing background to be able to help women really grow their business in the way that they know they can be, but are just not able to build the strategy blocks and get the strategy in place and be able to go through the mindset. So I moved into coaching last year and brought it all together.
I love that because I relate very much. I remember being in my agency and having clients that we were working with that I wished I was more involved with their business. And I was like, I can see how I can help them, but I didn't want to overstep what my role was. And it wasn't my place to kind of share guidance on how I felt they should run their business. That was for a business coach to do or for a mentor to do. And it happened really naturally for me from that frustration of just being like, okay, I'm helping, but I'm not getting to the root of the problem. Like these people that I'm working with, many of the people through the agency like didn't have a social media problem. They didn't have a email marketing problem. I could have the strongest campaigns going out and getting the best results there, but there were wider things within the business that needed to be addressed for them to get where they were telling me they wanted to be. And very similarly, I was like reached a point of frustration where I went no longer, and I was like, I need to figure out how I can actually do this with them and be able to offer that as a service.
Yeah, that really resonates. And you see businesses spending money where, because I agree with it, like reinvesting in your business does help it to grow, but if you reinvest into things which are just not getting you anywhere, that is so disheartening. And the fact that particularly with female founded businesses, a lot of them don't get to that point of even making six figures. And I'm not all about the money, but the fact that, only 12% of businesses do is crazy. Like that's,
it is nuts.
Change,
because it's so achievable with the right steps. I think is why it feels so foreign that's the data, because it's just like it's at your fingertips if you can just get things lined up correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I thought, did you have anybody in this space? Was there anybody who kind of influenced you to that move over from agency to coaching? Did you have any mentors or people that you saw that really was like, they're doing it?
Yeah, not particularly with like coaches or mentors in the coaching space, which I think now has been quite liberating actually, because I think I do work with coaches and I do invest in my business a lot. I've been able to, invest in people when I have different needs rather than trying to model the business that they've got. But there was definitely like organizations. I think the biggest thing that inspired me when I moved into coaching was just being around other communities and networks of women. Like I'm in a network in London, but also like women in advertising and communications leadership. I was a big part of that. And I just really loved that sense of community, which is something that I really try and bring into my business as well. But now when I invest, or when I see somebody that I'm inspired by, it's not really about a gap in my knowledge. Like obviously if I'm investing in a business coach, I want them to help me grow my business. But it's also about learning from people that are developing a business in the way that I want to develop my business. Very like values driven. So there's lots of people that I love to learn from, but I think they're all doing their own thing, and that's why I love to learn from them. They're not doing the cookie cutter thing, which you mentioned before.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's nothing nicer than when you find someone that you feel like a true connection with, and it's all of a sudden you'll get the best results ever because you really want to work with them, and you'll take on their opinions and their thoughts and apply it to your business properly, instead of just either copying what they tell you to do or being skeptical.
Because it's especially in a coaching relationship, it's so much based on trust, isn't it? It's trusting that somebody sees the best for you regardless of what their own business goals are and their own business model. It's about finding the right service or offer for them, and if you're not the right person, you're not the right person.
Absolutely. For the people watching, most of the people are early on in their business, and I think when we talk marketing, it can feel like that's something that's got a big price tag attached, and to do your marketing well, that's going to include a really large budget being put behind it. Do you have any pieces of advice for those businesses who are on a limited budget right now and looking to make a big impact with still a small budget?
And I think the thing with a smaller budget is really about, at that stage, it's about getting visibility rather than going out for sales. And I think one of the mistakes that can happen is that you go out for sales too quickly, which I know sounds counterintuitive because you're like, I'm a business, I need to make money. But if you don't build that trust, especially going back to the authenticity we talked about at the beginning, then you won't get the sales, but also you'll kind of start to doubt whether this is the right offer, and that's probably not the issue. It's just that people don't know you enough yet. So really focusing, I think, your budget into any budget you have, really thinking about how can I build trust and a community with my ideal client. So that could be, for example, not going out and spending money on Facebook ads to get sales, but actually using some budget for Facebook ads to build your email community, really thinking about that. I think the other thing is that social media is obviously free, and that is a no-brainer. But I think nowadays you have to think of your social media as if it is paid, as in terms of creating content that is going to give value, and not just the how-tos we talked about, but are you creating content and showing up to, like, with the energy that somebody's giving you their time, rather than thinking I need to post consistently on social media? There's a very different aim with that. And I think I see a lot of people, because social media is free, thinking, oh, I'll just be on there because that's not going to use my budget. You're delaying the growth of your business by not using it in, not showing up with the right intention.
I say that a lot in a different scenario about networking as well. I see a lot of people like endlessly go to networking events because they're free. I think networking is great. I run a networking event myself, and I go to some, but I'm very picky about what ones I go to these days, because I think you can spend hours upon hours of time, and it kind of goes into, okay, well, the networking event itself might be free, but how much is that hour of your time charged out to a customer worth? And once you start adding in, like, okay, so you did the networking event, but you also did all the one-to-one sessions with the attendees afterwards, and you had 4 extra Zoom calls that were all another hour each. and no work came of it, and no referrals, no nothing came from it. It's a similar concept in my brain to social media. As much as it is free, your time is not, and you could endlessly spend time creating more and more and more content to never get any further results if you don't do it cleverly. In the same way, you've got to pick the networking events that you go to more specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at this stage of business that we're talking about, this early stage, the biggest thing which will make your budget go further is having data, is like knowing what's working and being able to look at that. And I think when you get into the cycle of doing the free stuff or just showing up and not actually looking at what's working, like what am I implementing, how can I make that different, then you don't move forward because you're kind of more in the action of doing it rather than learning from it. And the biggest space you need to be in is learning that can make your budget go further.
Yeah, I agree. I think we were talking previously about in a different podcast episode about how when you're in your first year, that having a really low income month can be terrifying, because it's like, oh my God, this is a low income month. What have I done? I didn't change anything. Why isn't it working? Once you get data, you might realize that that month is consistently low for you and there's nothing that you're doing wrong. It's just that's your slow month, so to speak. And there is so much power in having that ability to almost be able to zoom out and see things with clearer perspective, whether that's data that you're collecting from your clients or whether that's data of how things are performing on your marketing, your social media, your accounts. All of it combined is hugely powerful.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the final thing that I'd say is just don't feel like you can't ask for what you want, for where you want your business to go. And by this, like collaborations, for example, or in front of like people that have bigger audiences, like if you stop seeing yourself at a small level in business and you start to think about where you want your business to go, that will really help you to get more visibility, to get in front of the right people. So just ask for where you want to go, ask for what you want to be.
I love that. There's a lot to be said for leaning on the people around you in your network and asking them when the time is right for favors, for referrals, to work together, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. So much easier to keep a client than to get a new one time and time.
Yes, absolutely. Any last pieces, any of wisdom that you would like to pass along to the audience watching?
Oh, it makes me feel like I have to be really, really wise.
No, you can say no as well if we feel like you've covered everything and you've got it all off your chest, but I like to offer it if we just haven't covered anything.
I think I've sort of covered a lot there.
I think I honestly had more questions and I was like, I don't even feel like we need to touch upon these. We've really given such an insight to the strategic side of things that I think will give a lot of clarity to people.
Okay, great. I had a mind blank, but
no, you're fine. My bad, I put you on the spot there.
That's all right.
Okay, so I will be popping Rachel's links of where you can connect with her in the description bar below, but look her up on LinkedIn and Instagram to connect. Like I said at the very beginning, we have connected so much on our approach, and I think if you're already following me, then Rachel is someone else you need to have in your network, because she's got this very authentic, value-driven approach to marketing, which is sorely lacking in a lot of the online space.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to have such a similar mindset on things and be able to dive in, so thank you.
No, not at all. Thank you for spending the time to share with everybody.